Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the NIHR Global Research Professorships Finance webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is Tom Pratt. I'm a Senior Programme Manager at the NIHR Academy. So I manage the scheme. So I'll be running through the slides. I've also been joined by my colleague Liz, who will be helping me with the chat function and the Q&A. Liz, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Liz. I'm one of the program managers at the NIHR Academy.
Okay, thank you, Liz. What we'll cover during the webinar, there'll be three main sections. So the first section, I'll just go over the main points of the finance and budget guidance. Obviously, I won't go through the whole of the guidance notes in details. It's quite a long document, but I'll try and cover the main points. But I would always recommend that you read the guidance notes in detail. The second section will be more focused on showing you our application system and the way it works in terms of submitting an application. So I'll just go over some of the key functions of that and how to make sure that the lead applicant can add the finance person and they're able to edit the budget as well as the lead applicant. And then finally, a question and answer session. As I said, we'll try and answer as many questions as we can. If there's any questions that we're not able to answer either because we don't have enough time or I don't have the full details to hand, I'll try and make sure that there's a Q&A document that goes with the slides that I'll send around afterwards. Also, to make you aware, if you haven't seen it, we did a webinar in September that gave a general overview of the Global Research Professorships. That is available on the YouTube channel that you can watch at any time. So today's webinar is very much finance focused. Okay, so I'll make a start on the first section, which is just highlighting the main points of the guidance. So the Global Research Professorship, this is a 5-year personal award, and it's funding up to £2 million. This is quite different to all the other global health programs that are funded that are more research grants. So this is very much a personal award with a focus on the lead applicant and their leadership and development, but there will be relevant research costs that are funded. So in terms of any costs that you're looking to include in the budget, so there's a few criteria that it must meet. So the first one, as with anything with the NIHR, because this is taxpayers' money that's being used to fund this work, is that it must represent value for money. So there will be a box that provides the justification for anything you're asking for. So just to make that clear, everything that you're asking for, why it represents good value for money. For all our global health research, it must be fit in with the official development assistance or ODA eligibility. There's specific details about what that involves in the guidance notes. And linked to that, the costs must be showing that it's for the direct relevance of the aim of our global health research program, which is improving the health needs and welfare of the most vulnerable people in low and middle income countries, or LMICs, as I'll refer to them. And broadly speaking as well, we must be able to see the direct relevance of what's being asked for in the budget to what's being asked for in the award. So that's not just the research, that will be leadership and training costs as well. And as I mentioned before, there will be a box for each item in the budget where you provide the justification. The level of justification probably will depend on the level of amount that you're being asked for and the type of item that you're being asked for in the budget. In terms of the types of organisations that can request costs for this award, we have made a change, which some of you may be aware if you saw the previous webinar. In previous rounds, the applications for a Global Research Professorship have to have been hosted by a UK-based university. So we've changed that for this round that's open at the moment. So it can be either a UK-based university that is the host organisation, or it can be a university or research institute in a low and middle income country. If you haven't seen it already, there is for this round as a bit of a trial for us. It's the first time that we've allowed LMIC host organizations for research profs. It's limited to organizations that have been a partner on an existing global research program for the NIHR. So there's around 150 institutes that we've put on our website. So if you're unsure about whether your organization is eligible to be a lead organisation, it will be on there, but there's also the opportunity for an LMIC organisation to be a partner as well, which isn't limited. That can be any relevant LMIC organisation. So in terms of how we fund the two different organisations, if it's a UK university that's taking the lead, we will be funding, as with all UK NIHR awards for universities, it will be 80% of full economic costing. So that's 80% of the direct costs and indirect costs for the lead applicant and potentially the 5-year postdoc support post as well. If the lead organisation is going to be a LMIC HEI Research Institute, then it would be 100% of direct costs and also 100% of indirect costs, which are calculated as the proportion of staff involved in the application. So the Global Research Profs are very much focused on research capacity strengthening. So it's a very people-focused award. There are research costs, but a large proportion of the cost will be staff. So we would say for any staff that are being costed into the award, these should include increments on a pay scale, but not inflation. Any inflationary uplifts are at the discretion of the Department of Health and Social Care, so should not be included when you're inputting the salary costs for everyone involved. It's not just the salary costs, it can also be on costs that can be requested. So this could include superannuation or pension costs, national insurance, apprenticeship levy, and potentially any geographical weighting as well. So the salary costs should be requested at the level appropriate for what's being requested for those people to undertake work. We have said in the guidance notes and in the previous webinar, the award does come with a number of support posts. So we'll fund the lead applicant, the global research professor for the 5 years. There are also a number of support posts that come with this. So previously these have been configured as a 5-year postdoctoral researcher, a 3-year postdoctoral researcher, and a 3-year doctoral researcher. The feedback that we've had from particularly people that have been successful and are currently undertaking the award is that this configuration didn't always work for particular countries they were in. So what we've said is that the support post can be configured in a flexible way, but we'd ask people to get in touch if they're not sure about how this should be done. So as long as we just make sure that the pay scales are appropriate for the level that's being requested for the support post. And as I said, if you've got any specific queries about that, get in touch. And we'll also discuss this during contracting if you are successful as well. So in terms of splitting the cost for the support posts, we will be providing some training costs for some of these posts, and also PhD fees or master's fees if appropriate for any of the support posts. But what we'd ask is that any salary costs are put into the salary cost section, including any stipends, particularly potentially if it's a studentship. But any costs relating to their training and development will be on a separate section. So if there's PhD fees, for example, they would be entered in the training and development section rather than the salary cost section. So as I mentioned, the training and development costs are quite a key area for the research professorships. So what we'd ask is put into these sections can be the leadership and personal development costs for the lead applicant. This can be formal courses for leadership potentially. There can be quite a wide range of formal courses that people like to go on. And this can also include some coaching costs for one-to-one coaching. Should just differentiate between coaching and mentoring. So coaching would be a formal coaching program rather than mentorship, which we would fund costs for you to go in and see a mentor, but we wouldn't fund the cost for that mentor for their time. And as I mentioned as well, there is costs for formal training for support posts, whether this could be at master's level or PhD level. And I'll just touch upon the different level of fees that we'll provide. So the 3 different scenarios for this award. So the first one will be if a potentially a PhD student based in a low middle income country and registered for a PhD in a low middle income country, then NIHR would fund the full fees for this, and we'd just need copies of the requested fees from whichever university the PhD is registered with. If a student is based in an LMIC, but they're registering for a PhD with a UK university, we would expect to see the UK university providing a discount. So we would expect it to be around the same level as a UK national would pay. And we'd like to see, if that's not the case, any justification as to why, but we would be looking at what negotiations have happened for a reduction in the fees. And the third scenario, potentially, if it's a UK university that is the host organisation and a support post is based there and registered in the UK, then this would fall under the normal NIHR contribution, which is a maximum of 4,500 per annum. So I'll just go on to equipment now. So there's relevant research costs that can be requested as part of the Global Research Professorship. But we have to be sure that any items that are purchased are used for the research only, and that they also meet the ODA eligible criteria. So this would be making sure that this is going to be used for the research which is going to benefit LMICs and not just for any other purpose, such as commercial purposes, or if it's just a piece of equipment that's purchased in the UK to just be used in the UK and not linked to any relevant LMIC work. So we just need the justification for why that equipment is needed. Also looking at sustainability for potentially large pieces of equipment that will have a long shelf life, that making sure that it's sustainable after the project end date, because it will become the property of the potentially the contractor who's hosting the award, or a potential partner in an LMIC. In terms of the level of detail, if there is an item that's £250 or over, then each item must be listed separately. There is the flexibility to group the same item. So if you're buying a group lot of 100 heart rate monitors, for example, then you can put that in one box, but just make it clear in the justification how many units you're buying and what the unit price is, just so we can see that calculation. There is some criteria for what we would consider a property asset. Full details are in the finance guidance notes. And we would request, it's a requirement that an asset register is kept, and that will be reported on annually as part of the ongoing checks for the award. So in terms of the research costs that can be requested, these can be quite wide ranging. And the costs should be based at current prices. As with the salary costs, these should be based on current prices and not including inflation. We will be checking this as part of the contracting, and if any inflation has been included, then we will remove that. We appreciate that research costs may be requested in a number of different countries, but for the purposes of this application, all costs must be listed in pound sterling. Any exchange rates that are used to calculate this must be provided for any costs that are related to international organizations. We'd like to see the breakdown of all the costs. So as part of the contracting, we would just go through the justification, and it would help us a lot if, and with the selection committee reviewing this, if they could see how calculations have been arrived at. We do sometimes get applications where the justification is very brief and it's very unclear how, sometimes quite large amounts have been requested, and there's a sentence just saying these are the consumable costs needed. We'd like to see a breakdown of how that's been calculated. Otherwise, it's very hard to judge value for money. There is also the issue of VAT. We'd always ask you to speak to your VAT expert at your organisation about the status of this. We'd expect any universities, particularly in the UK, to be able to reclaim VAT. If that isn't the case, there is a box to indicate that, but we may query this during contracting. In terms of travel costs, there may be quite a lot of travel involved, particularly if you're going between different countries. As with any NIHR awards, this should be done using the most economic way possible. So we'll be looking to ensure that any journeys are done using economy class, and any accommodation is based on standard rates as well. Again, we will be checking this to make sure that this is complying with the rules. So just be aware that this will be checked. And again, this should be in the justification of any travel costs about how it's been calculated, and just making it clear it's been done using standard or the most economical way possible. So I'll move on to the next section, which is just around our application system. But just while we do that, there will be a poll that's being circulated shortly. This is just for us to get an idea of who's joined the webinar and what role you're potentially in and whereabouts in the world you're calling from. So it'd be very useful if you could fill that out, please. So the next section I'll touch upon is the Aramis, which is our application system. So just some hints and tips about navigating your way around that. So for the Global Research Profs, this is a single stage application. So that does mean that the full detailed budget will be submitted as part of this application. So it's not a two-stage application like some other awards. So just be aware that the deadline for this is the 1st of December. So that will include all the detailed budget having to be submitted. And if you haven't seen it already, the address for our application system is aramis.nihr.ac.uk. So if the lead applicant hasn't done this already, and if you're a lead applicant wanting to find out how you do this, or you're potentially a finance person wanting to know how you get access to the budget pages, the lead applicant will need to add the relevant signatory for the finance office. And they can do this using the participants and signatory section. So in the participants and signatory section, there is a link there to add a person. If they're already on the system, you can put their first and last name on there and search. If they're not on there, then you can add them as a new account on there, and then they will get emails notifying them that they've been added to the application, and then just instructions about how to update their account, and then also how to agree their participation in the application. So in terms of the screens that the finance signatory will get, they'll be instructed to confirm their participation, which is the screenshot on the left there. Once they've done that and agreed to the terms in the blue box above, then that box will change to an edit box, and then that will allow the finance officer to edit the application and then start in cooperation with the lead applicant and anyone else that needs to be involved, start populating that budget page. So the budget page can be edited by both the lead applicant and the finance signatory. Obviously, we'd expect that there would be an open channel of communication between them, just to make sure that you're not filling out the same thing. But it's up to you. I mean, some people prefer for the lead applicant to complete this page, and other people prefer the finance signatory to do it. So it's up to you. Either can have access at the same time, and it's a slightly restricted view for the finance signatory. They will be able to just edit the detailed budget page, whereas the lead applicant will obviously have access to the whole application. If you are the finance signatory, the link I've highlighted there when you go into the application is a link to the applicant guidance if you haven't seen it already. So this is a PDF version of the guidance. So that will just give you some further detail if you haven't seen it already. I'd always suggest saving as often as possible. This is quite a long page with a lot of different fields, and it can be quite a labor-intensive process. So you can, there are buttons up there in the top right. You can see you can either save and close when you're finished, or you can just have maybe when you've done a section, just press the save button. It just saves what you've done to make sure that any work that you've done in terms of filling this out isn't lost. So the budget summaries will be updated as you put costs in. There will be some subheadings which will summarize different sections, but you can also just double check as you go through to make sure that any costs you've updated have been reported accurately. It's worth having a double check of that to make sure a zero hasn't been left out or added on accidentally. You can get a summary of the different section headings, but also the total amount being requested at the bottom of the page. As I mentioned before, there are justification of cost boxes that are included for every item that you put in there. It probably will depend on the particular item being requested about the level of justification that's needed. I would just try and make it clear and just imagine that if you're someone coming to this independently, is it clear how that total has been calculated? If there's any areas that we're not sure of, we may come back to you after submission, or particularly during contracting if you're successful, when we're going through that budget just to confirm as part of the contracting process. So this is an application system that's set up mainly for people to apply in England. So there are some sections of the finance form which are not relevant to the global research profs. So I would suggest that if you are looking at this, particularly from an LMIC, any questions around NHS costs, if you just tick or just click on the not applicable NA box, just to ignore that. So it is a question that needs a response, but if you just put NA, because this shouldn't be relevant to a global research professorship application. So in terms of currencies, all the costs have to be listed in pound sterling, as mentioned before. So we'll just need to see if there are any costs that have been calculated in terms of exchange rates. If you can just give an indication of the details, so the currency that you're calculating it from, the rate, the source, and the date of the exchange rate, and then we can just have that for our auditing purposes. Yeah, I mean, you just list those details. So we just ask that you do the costing in the local currency first, then convert it to pound sterling, and then enter it into the form. We would not cover any contingency for exchange rate fluctuations, so that shouldn't be included in the application. So in terms of the scrutiny that the budget will go through as part of the application process, so the selection committee will be obviously looking at the whole application, so they'll be reviewing the applicant, the quality and relevance of the research and the proposed leadership, but they'll also be requested to comment on whether it offers value for money as well. So it's, as I mentioned before, it's the right justification being in there, so it's clear for them to make a decision on that. The NIHR will challenge any costs that it doesn't consider appropriate or we don't consider it to be offering value for money. This will probably come up during the contracting, particularly if there's wide-ranging costs and the full justification hasn't been given. That will come up during contracting, and that will be looked at in a great level of detail. If you are successful, then payments for these awards will be made in arrears on a quarterly basis from the Department of Health and Social Care. And we'll also be asking for quarterly finance returns. So it's just to make sure that your team are aware of that. We are able to consider costs, particularly for LMIC organisations that may be requested to do quite labour-intensive finance management. So that costs for that in LMIC organisations can be included, and that's something we can discuss if you have any specific queries. So the contract, the research contract for this award will be between Department of Health and Social Care and the host organisation, which will be employing the lead applicant. So any funds will be paid to the host organisation, and it will be up to them to distribute those costs accordingly to any partner organisations. What I would say in terms of very much for the benefit of the programme, particularly my finance colleagues, is trying to make sure that your budget is forecasted as accurately as possible. Again, we will go over this in contracting to make sure that the award isn't too front-loaded or back-loaded, and that you're trying to, as accurately as possible, forecast when costs will be incurred, because we don't want to be in a situation where either too many or too much of the budget is given early on and it's not spent, or vice versa, that you haven't budgeted appropriately and your outgoings are a great deal more than the costs that are coming in on the arrears basis. This will be reviewed as part of the finance returns as well, so it could be that although that the budget isn't changed as such, that the payment schedules may change if there's one extreme or the other, either you're overspending or underspending quite a lot. So just a quick reminder of the important dates for this round. So as I mentioned before, this is a single stage application. So the deadline for applications of 1 p.m. UK time on the 1st of December. That will need for the budget to be included and signed off. This will also need the finance signatory to sign the application off after it's been submitted, and this must be done before 1 p.m. on the deadline. In terms of next stages after that, the outcome from the shortlisting process after the selection committee have reviewed the applications will be around March 2022. There'll be a period of external peer review because we have quite a large selection committee, but they can't be experts in every single area. So do have an extra step just to review that, particularly the research element of this proposal. Outcomes for that will be sent out in May. And then interviews are scheduled to be mid to late June 2022. The exact format to be decided, whether that will be Zoom or face-to-face. And then if successful, the available start dates would be the 1st of October, 1st of November, or 1st of December 2022. So that's the end of my slides. So we'll move to any questions. So I will stop sharing my slides.
Yeah, so we've had a few questions come in, Tom, so I'll start with the first that's on the top of the list. So Helen Hines wants to know, can entry of finance data be delegated to an administrator?
Potentially, yes. I mean, there is potential flexibility in the system to add someone who can potentially do the inputting of it, because as I said, it can be quite labor intensive. But in terms of the sign off, it will depend on the size of the organization about who's the relevant person to sign off the budget. So it is possible that the lead applicant can enter someone as an administrator to enter the costs, but then we would need they can then remove that person and put in a relevant signatory who can sign it off. So yes, that is possible.
Thank you. So the next person this is a question, Trevor. So he wants to know, I note that this is the first time the application is open to persons in LMICs. Do you know if this call will be issued again in 2022?
Yes, I mean, that's certainly the aim. So this is the first year that we've opened it to applicants in LMICs. The expectation that we have limited it this year as it's a bit of a pilot to organisations that are partners on existing or previous global health NIHR awards. But the expectation is that this will be an annual call, and then we hope to open up the eligibility to any university or research institute in a lower middle income country.
The next question we've got here, so do we need to evidence reduced PhD fees with a letter of support for example, or would this be obvious by the value entered in the detailed budget?
I would say it should be obvious by the detail put in the detailed budget. We would probably come across this more in the contracting. I don't think it's an area, because it's quite specific, that the selection committee would be assessing. But during contracting, if we don't think the evidence is suitable, we may come back and just ask for further evidence as part of that contracting process. But you don't have to upload a letter of support or any detail into the application as such.
Thank you, Tom. So the next question we've got here, so I'll read it out as it's stated here. So if we don't have any contingency for exchange rate fluctuations, how should we deal with any major fluctuations that mean the money arriving at the ODA partner is less than expected to carry out the work?
That's a good question. It's probably one I might have to go back and check. I mean, I think what we would tend to do is revisit at the point of contracting. If there's anything that's happened in terms of that might be specific to that country, or potentially, that something might have happened globally. We'll try and be as pragmatic as we can, but that is one that I might have to write up into the Q&A and get a bit more detail in to how we manage that.
Thank you. Yeah, so keep an eye out in the Q&A for that one. So the next question we've got here. So our institution would typically increase the salary grade of the applicant should they be successful. Would it be allowed to forecast the salary accordingly?
Well, yes and no. So the idea of this award is that someone should be, either if they're not a professor yet, they should be quite close to being made a professor. So it's acceptable that if someone is potentially at a reader or a senior lecturer level, and then as part of this award, their promotion to a professor is included, then we would expect them to have the relevant salary increase costed into the budget. What we probably wouldn't accept is that if someone's already a professor and then there's a salary increase just on the basis of getting this award, that isn't normally a cost that we would accept. So if it's an increase based on promotion to a professorship as part of the terms of the award, then yes. If it's a promotion for a professor just purely based on getting this award, then it would be a no.
Thank you. So quick one here. So for a UK hosted application, are LMIC partner costs funded at 100% or 80%?
Any LMIC partners, we would fund costs at 100%. So the UK hosted applications, the 80% FEC would be just for the costs for the host university rather than any LMIC partners.
Thank you. So got a follow-up question, I think, here. So if you are not allowed to budget if you are not allowed to budget for inflation for staff costs, how do we cope with those increased costs year on year? Surely we will ultimately then be short of money to pay salaries.
It's a good question. So the Department of Health and Social Care have not included inflation for a number of years. It was included previously, and it led to quite substantial underspends. What we have found is that awards do tend to underspend over the 5-year period. So what we would do as part of the reconciliation process is look at any overspends on salary costs and if it can be potentially offset by any underspends elsewhere. So it is a policy that's been in place for quite a while that inflation hasn't been included, but what we would suggest is that we discuss this as part of the reconciliation process, and it will be looked at during the award as well with the regular quarterly finance reports as well. So it's something that we keep an eye on and certainly discuss as the award progresses.
Thank you, Tom. So the next one, there's 2 questions here, so I'll start with the first one first. So if the university institution is not listed as one previously funded, will they not be able to apply?
If this is a low and middle income country university, then that is the case. It's not necessarily if they were funded. They could have been a partner, so they might not have been a lead applicant, but they may have been a partner organisation on a previous Global Health NIHR award. If you're talking about the UK, then it's open to any university in England, Wales, Northern Ireland or Scotland. But as I said, the limits that we've put on the LMIC organisations is just as part of a pilot. So for future rounds, we would expect that any HEI or research institute in an LMIC country would be eligible to apply.
I think the follow-up question there is if the application comes from an organisation that works with a number of universities in UK and LMICs, will this be considered? I'm guessing that's kind of
yeah, I mean, probably answered by the previous point that if it's not on our page on our website of all the eligible organisations, then for this round, an LMIC HR research wouldn't be able to be the lead or the host organisation. They could still be eligible as a partner, so they may be able to take part, but not necessarily as a lead applicant for this round. But that may be different in future rounds.
Thanks, Tom. So I've got one here. It seems clinical trial costs can potentially be included, but how about associated staff? So, for example, biostatisticians, health economists, and qualitative experts.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a wide range of research costs as long as they can be shown to be relevant and justified. So we do say in the guidance notes that it's unlikely we'll be able to fund the cost of a full clinical trial, because that's, given the number of staff involved, potentially estates and indirects for some of these staff, leadership and development costs, there just wouldn't be enough budget within that £2 million limit to run a full trial. But there are, trial related costs are still eligible. So some shared staff can be costed in to this award. Again, there's probably a limit to how many people you can include in that. But if justified, it could be relevant to include, trial related or other people that you require a small percentage of their time to input into certain parts of the research program. So a biostatistician or a health economist could be, or a trial manager, for example. But the expectation is that the support posts and the lead applicant will be doing the bulk of the work, but there is the chance to request for some shared staff to input into the research.
Thank you. So the next one, I think they've copied and pasted part of the guidance notes in the actual Q&A. So if that is you, then hopefully this does apply. So it says here, you mentioned that UK institution costs are funded at 80% FEC. However, on the guidance, some support salary costs are 100%. So please, can you confirm this?
Yes, I could have been clearer in that, and I didn't want to muddy the waters, I guess. So in terms of the bulk of the costs for a UK host organisation would be at 80% FEC. The exceptions to that are if you were looking to have the support post in the configuration that I mentioned earlier. The lead applicant and the 5-year postdoc would be funded at 80% FEC and attract estates and indirect costs. The 3-year postdoctoral and the 3-year doctoral post would be funded at 100% direct costs, but do not attract estates and indirects. So apologies for any confusion, but I hope that clarifies that particular query. But if you've got or you need any further clarification, then do get in touch after the webinar, and happy to have a chat.
Thank you. So another one here, do UK organisations need an LMIC partner to be eligible to apply?
Not necessarily, but it would probably be the exception. I mean, I guess it's up to the lead applicant to try and justify which partner organisations they're looking to include. I guess the difficulty might be if it's all UK-based organisations, how you're going to show that the impact is going to be brought through into, for the benefit of people in low and middle income countries. So it's not necessarily it would prevent you from applying or make you ineligible, but you would need to give a great deal of thought as to how that partnership is justified in terms of the focus of this program is very much for the benefit of people in LMIC. So it's not a no, but you need to give a bit of thought as to how that would work.
So we've got a question here about the RMS form. So after the applicant has submitted the application online, can the finance signatory still edit the finance section?
They cannot. So, I mean, again, as I mentioned before, that channel of communication between the lead applicant and the finance officer should be ongoing, and to make sure everyone's happy with it. Once it's submitted, then the application is locked and can't be edited. If the finance signatory notices an issue, then they will be asked to approve the application. If they think there's an issue, they can reject the application, and then it's returned back to the lead applicant. Then it can be edited again. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, and particularly if it's on the closing date. What we don't want is the phone calls that we get every year where someone panics because they're running out of time. So this should be done well in advance. Everyone's agreed that the budget is as accurate as it can be and it's submitted. If you do happen to catch something, the lead applicant or the finance signatory, someone needs to reject the application as part of the approval process, then it's returned again and you're back to that step of validating the application, submitting it again, and then getting approval.
Yeah, so we do advise trying to get it in ready to go. So the next one here, following on from the LMIC question that we had previously. So is there a limit to a number of partner organisations in an application?
I think there is a system limit, but it's quite high. I think it's 20. I don't think anyone's really got as high as 20, but I think that's the system limit. That's probably a few too many, but there is the potential to add in a number of different partner organizations. Again, you just need to give thought to what's the right amount and the relevance of the different partners.
I think a similar question that's just come in here as well. So although only one main partner is listed, could you conduct more than one country?
Yes, that is possible. There is on our Global Research Prof page, there is a blog from one of our current award holders, Professor Joe Jarvis. So his award is actually undertaking research in 5 different sub-Saharan African countries. I'm trying to remember which ones they are now, but it is possible. Again, you just need to give thought about how that would work, particularly if there's staff in different countries, but it is possible, and someone has been funded undertaking work in 5 different countries.
Thank you. So a few finance questions here. So are project manager salary costs eligible under the 3 support posts, or do these need to be researcher support posts? So for example, a project manager to manage budget, annual reporting, project governance and compliance.
So the support posts are very much focused on our aim of research capacity strengthening. So we're expecting these to be research active posts. If it's a UK HEI, we'd probably expect that a lot of that infrastructure is there and part of the estates and indirects. We'd probably be more flexible in terms of an LMIC country, potentially where a lot of the NIHR forms and level of monitoring may be quite different. So it's possible to add in away from the support post, some costs for that financial monitoring. But I think the expectation would be in the UK that the university should already have those.
And just following on another finance query, does the travel for fieldwork have a separate budget than that of the £3,000 allowance for the 5-year postdoc?
It does, yeah. So the 3,000 for the 5-year postdoc is very much a training fund. So that can be used for travel to attend conferences or potentially for training courses. Research travel costs we would treat as separate. So that's not limited as such. That would be up to the lead applicant to justify what travel's involved and the cost for that. So the training costs of £3,000 is separate to any required travel to undertake the research.
Thanks, Tom. So we've just got a follow-up question in regards to the Aramis application process. So just a bit of clarification, I think. So I'm still a bit uncertain on the sequence of events for submission. The applicant needs to submit, and then the finance team in the submitting organisation, but also various other signatories and participants, do they need to sign? What is the required order for all of this?
What I might do is just share my screen if I can find the flow diagram. So let me just see if I can find this.
Yeah, it's not the most straightforward.
Oh, apologies, everyone. So I'm hoping you can see the signatory flow diagram on this page. So in terms of the steps here, what we're looking here at steps 4, 5, and 6. So the expectation is before step 4 that all the relevant people have had a chance to input into the application. Then the applicant presses submit. Then this sends out automated emails that would go to all the signatories, asking them to approve or reject the application. So this is where I mentioned before, if anyone spots an error at this point, whether it's the lead signatory from the host or the finance signatory, that they can reject it and return it. If everyone's happy with the application, all the signatories press approve. And once all the signatories have approved the application, so that's a lead signatory from the host organization, a finance signatory from the host organization, and a lead signatory from the main partner organization. Once everyone's approved the application after submission, then it's fully submitted to the NIHR, and everyone will get automated emails to indicate that the application's been submitted to NIHR and a reference number. So I hope that's clearer, but again, if not, or you need more clarification, then do get in touch.
Thank you. And then the last question that we've got in the Q&A is a question here about research costs. So I am still unclear about the research costs in terms of running data collection that could be included. I'm just wondering if you could maybe elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as I said, it's quite, these aren't, themed calls, so it's very much researcher led. So we'll get a wide range of different research projects that are coming to us to be reviewed. I think as long as it fits the broad criteria of what we outlined earlier, that it offers value for money, it's ODA eligible, then any relevant research costs, whether that's equipment, consumables, potentially any data collection, potentially devices to collect that data, then it would be considered. So there's no restrictions on the type of research cost that can be requested, as long as it meets the criteria outlined earlier in the webinar.
Thank you. So there's no other Q&As in the Q&A section. Does anybody on the call have anything else that they want to offer before we wrap it up?
I mean, as I said, if there are any other queries, or you've got very project specific or application specific questions that are quite detailed, then do get in touch with the team, and we can certainly answer any of those. Oh, I think we've got one.
Just got one through.
One last one.
Yes. So the last one here: can there be a focus on global development in, is it the UK Institute? I think that's what. There's a bit of a typo there, but I think it's meant to say the UK Institute.
Possibly. I think there would, again, a great deal of thought probably needs to be put into how you're going to say this is primarily for the benefit of people in low middle income countries. So it sounds a bit speculative. What I'd probably say, if this is an actual idea that you're considering, I'd probably suggest getting in touch with us, and we can try and discuss that in a bit more detail to make sure that it's meeting the aims of the program.
We have got one more come in.
Okay, last one.
We'll do the last one and then we'll wrap it up. So can you please expand a little bit more on how you determine value for money?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's probably for every single item, there's a general, every single item you want to make sure that it's an appropriate amount for what's being requested. The value for money is probably, I think, seen throughout the application about why this fund is relevant to making a step change in someone's career and also benefiting people in LMICs. So it will depend. If it's a very specific lab-based item, then you're just saying what the costs are and what it's going to be used for, rather than having a focus on why it's a particularly good deal. But the committee, in terms of what they're reviewing in value for money, is probably the whole budget in total, to just say, is this appropriate for the work that's being carried out? So there will be sections where it's specific to an item, and if it's appropriately costed. But then also, I think the lead applicant will have to try and justify throughout the application why the whole package of the application, the research, the leadership, the support posts, are offering a step change in their career, and then also the benefit of the research that will be realized in the LMICs. So I think that's probably all the questions. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you to Liz for the Q&A section. And we'll hopefully hear from some of you in terms of your progress in submitting an application. Thank you very much.
Thank you.